All right, sounds good. So this presentation is about healing fears and childhood traumas, and it's a sequel to the previous one I did. It's more about from surviving to thriving this time. So there's more enhancements to the last one I did. And in case you haven't watched my previous webinar, I would still recommend that you do that, although I'm going to repeat a few things from there. Okay, so first of all, I really want to take a second to congratulate everyone to survive, for surviving. I know it's been pretty hard journey for many of us, and it is useful to just tell yourself, oh my God, look what I've done so far. I have come this far, I have survived, and I'm now planning to thrive. And you had a choice of quitting, but you did not. So very proud of you guys. Very briefly, my background. I was born and raised in India. I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. I felt very lonely, isolated, depressed, and terrified. My father was missing all the time, and my mother was narcissistic, always ready to fight with other people. So very scared, very, very scared. Fortunately, I developed a deep interest in spirituality at a very, very young age. And when I was 7, I read the book Autobiography of a Yogi, and literally changed my life after that. And fortunately, I got to meet many spiritually advanced teachers in my life, which was a blessing for me. On the left-hand side is one of my direct teachers, Goswami Kriyananda, and he was in the lineage of Yogananda Paramahansa that many of you know, who wrote the book Autobiography of a Yogi. What a magical book. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. And then I came to the US in 1990 to do my master's in computer science. And then I worked at Motorola for 16 years, where I was one of the pioneers of 3G and 4G cellular technologies. Then I became tired of the corporate world, and I decided to follow my passion. I've done a lot of spiritual work, healing work, spiritual work, meditation, you name it. I think I was calculating one day, I've probably spent over 100,000 hours in self-work. And I also discovered at the age of 7, actually, that I had some unique gifts as well, which got hidden from me for quite a while. Now, let's start with the presentation. So first thing is to recognize what the problem is. Healing our consciousness is a confusing task at best. And knowing the problem itself is half the solution. So the first problem is we live in a world where the theme of human existence is fear. And I won't go into the details, but I think it should be fairly obvious to everyone by now that fear is the root of every single challenge in life. And I mean every single challenge. There is not a challenge that is not rooted in fear. All negative emotions are rooted in fear: anger, resentment, hatred, etc. And these negative emotions then start to create toxicity in the body and the mind, and disease starts at a later stage in life. The what is the need of a child when they are growing up? Physical safety and love, right? Those are the two primary needs of a human being, right? Would you agree with that? I'm hoping you agree with that. Now, what happens if they don't get this for any number of reasons? We call them as traumas. If you don't get the safety or the love in your early part of life, that leads to traumas. And another word of trauma is fear. Meaning tremendous fear gets installed in the human consciousness if the child does not get the love and safety during the formative years. And this starts a really bad trajectory of life. Because fear, as you know, is a highly creative force on the negative side, just like love is a highly creative force on the positive side. And fear generates more fear till it becomes a vicious cycle. Now, how does the child learn to survive? Because of the fear and the traumas are so overwhelming to the child's consciousness that they need to find ways to survive. And one of the main ways the child uses, the consciousness uses to survive, is that it disconnects the link between the heart and the mind. Because the emotions are so painful and difficult to deal with, that this is the solution most of us use to find survival. Another way of saying this is we bury our feelings and emotions in order to survive. We literally bury them. So if you look at this map of consciousness, so at the deepest level is soul, right? You cannot exist on this plane without a soul here. That is your source. On top of the soul is your I am layer. It's sort of a identity that a soul picks up in this lifetime to go through its journey and learn its lessons. It's an identity it's picking up, right? We pick up very specific identities in this lifetime to exist in this world. Then from the I am generates the energy body. Energy body is above the I am layer. From the energy body generates the feelings. From the feelings generates the mental body, the thoughts, the beliefs and whatnot. And then from the mental body generates the physical body. So the child learns to disconnect the mental body and the emotional body or the feelings body. And that becomes a problem eventually. Now, the identity layer can be broken into three pieces. And as I talk in more detail in my previous webinar, the deepest layer is your divine I am, which is your soul. Then on top of it is the wounded I am that gets created between the ages of 2 and 3. Pretty accurately between 2 and 3. It is not before and not after in most cases. And the wounded identities can be so many different flavors, but the common ones are, I am not safe. I'm not loved. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable enough. I'm a bad person. I'm guilty. There's something wrong with me, etc., etc. These are some of the common wounded I ams. Then after the age of 3, we create coping I ams. These coping I ams are actually designed for survival purposes. because the wound is so painful. So the wound, the coping I am is like a band-aid on top of the wound. The band-aid works for years and decades to protect the wound. Please note, it is very important to note that the band-aid does work. Otherwise, you won't have the band-aid. However, the unfortunate part is that we completely forget about the wound, and the wound starts to fester over time. And at some point in life, the wound will come out, 99% of the cases, will come out in pretty nasty ways. So the healing really revolves around healing the wound, of course, and then, of course, healing the coping mechanisms through awareness and self-work and support. Now, as part of coping and survival mechanism, something called personality adaptation comes in. It's a common term used in psychology. We start to change our nature to fit in, to get some love, acceptance, and safety to survive. We start to learn the arbitrary definitions of good and bad from the society. And as a result of that, we learn to pretend. We pretend ourselves to be really good from the outside and hide the negative. Have you seen people, and I'm talking about myself as well here, go into religious places, sing songs of devotion, pretend to be kind and loving, and come home and do really bad things? So let me give you a short list of things I did to survive. My mother was narcissistic, so this was a perfect camouflage for survival purposes. I took on the personality of weakness because my mother was overwhelmingly powerful. So I took on the personality of weakness so that I can stay low. I used to get in trouble because that was the time I got my parents' attention. Illness was another common one. Many of us use that. Illness is the time we get the attention of the parents. Anger, complaining was another favorite I used. Becoming a martyr to prove my self-worth. Perfection to please the parents. Hiding my light, hiding myself. And the most favorite of all, a victim mindset. So I would highly recommend you take a few seconds to think about what coping mechanisms did you apply to survive. And if by any chance anybody has an interest in coming online and telling all of us what were the mechanisms that you used to survive, I'll be happy to hear that. Just unmute yourself and you can come on. Otherwise, no worries, we'll continue.
I would like to just acknowledge that everything that you just said was so accurate for myself. And thank you for your openness and your sharing, because that helped me to understand the victim and the martyr and the whole. I also had a narcissistic mother, and I chose many of the same things you did. And the problem has always been knowing what I'm doing and kind of why I'm doing it, but not ever able to find a way out. So I just want to thank you for this. I know that we're continue, but I don't know. I just wanted to validate that everything you're saying is so accurate and touches me deep to the core. Thank you.
Thank you. I truly appreciate your feedback. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Wonderful. Excellent. Okay, so let's continue. Yeah, before I move on, I just want to remind you that these coping mechanisms become so deep rooted that our body and mind starts to demonstrate them in physical reality. And if you look at this picture again of the layers of consciousness, this is how it works. Our physical body, our mental body will reflect the wounded and the coping I ams. So it's not just something in our heads or something, it will come out in the physical body. So when I'm playing a victim, when I'm playing a role of being ill and stuff, this is not just in my head anymore. It's actually coming out in physical body. So all our challenges at some level or the other are rooted in these wounded I am and the coping I am. All challenges, bar none. You cannot show me even a single challenge that is not rooted in one of these I ams. Okay, so moving on. Another way to a slightly different way of looking at it is as a part of coping mechanism, we start to cut off pieces of our being so that we can fit into the society. We're literally cutting it off. We disconnect from our emotions and feelings that are not acceptable to the society. So in case you heard, if you cry, I'll give you something to cry about. How will this program the child? Right? They will learn to cut off their emotions. So we start to seek perfection to meet the expectations of the parents and the society. And the unfortunate part is each of these pieces that you cut off from your consciousness will come back to bite you eventually, bite us eventually, sometimes in pretty nasty ways. So we create at least two personalities, usually more, but at least two personalities. So for example, you can probably relate to this to some degree. When you're in your job, you're behaving differently. When you're in the house, you're behaving differently. When you're with your friends, you're behaving differently. So these are different personalities in order to adapt to the environment. Right? We are not one anymore. We are almost disjointed set of personalities. And the interesting thing is some parts of these personalities are visible to us and some parts are not. Some parts are so deeply hidden that we don't even know they exist. And that's where the problem is. Some of these hidden parts will try to come up into our consciousness to be integrated. You cannot hide them forever. So they will come out in various ways. And the job of healing is really to integrate all the pieces that we cut off. And like the example I gave in the last webinar, if you take a photograph of a person's consciousness, so let's say I'm able to take a photograph of the person's consciousness, then the hidden and buried pieces of their consciousness will look like holes in the picture. Just like in this picture, there are holes in there. And that's what the picture of the consciousness will look like. There are missing pieces because we buried them. And as you all know, and I hope everybody is able to accept this fact, that the entire reality is based on our consciousness. There is nothing outside of our consciousness. There is no real physical world out there. It's all being generated from our consciousness. And that's, I know it's a hard thing to accept, especially we have lived so long in this belief that there's a world out there. And quantum physics is actually proving this now, that you cannot separate the consciousness from reality. The reality is completely dependent on the consciousness. And this is a really good news, actually. If I can change my consciousness, I can change my world. How empowering is that? So I also gave the example last time that if imagine somebody has got some pretty nasty disease where the doctors say you have to cut out a body part, some issue where the body has to be organ or things, something has to be cut out. And the question is, how did this happen? How did we reach that point where this body part has to be cut out? It's because of that missing piece, right? The missing piece from the consciousness is going to reflect in the body, that means the body has to align with that picture, the internal picture of the consciousness. That hole in the consciousness will manifest as a hole in the body in a physical way. Now that sounds pretty horrible, of course it is, but the good news is that if you fill that hole with your own consciousness work, then the body part will regenerate. Because the body has to 100% align with your consciousness. No other way. Okay. Moving on. So now about a little bit more understanding the culture that we live in, the society that we live in. We live in a culture where positivity and power are considered good, and weakness of any kind is looked down upon. And then guess what happens to our weak parts? I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable enough, and all that kind of stuff. We will hide them because the society doesn't accept that. We have to be positive all the time. Right? So we learn to hide and pretend, no matter how we're feeling inside. So there is an undercurrent of emotions of the wound that flow under the surface. And if you pay attention to this undercurrent of emotionality, you'll be surprised what flows in there. No matter how we are trying to change our minds and think differently, there is an undercurrent of emotions that you can tap into if you pay attention. Have you seen many so-called spiritual healers who only want to talk about love and light? If you talk about anything else, they look down upon you with an amazing arrogance. In their minds, if you can just think about positive things, life will become wonderful. Yes, positivity is great, but spiritual bypasses not. So this was a term coined by a psychologist who said use of spiritual practices and beliefs to avoid dealing with uncomfortable feelings, unresolved wounds, and fundamental emotional and psychological needs is called spiritual bypass. Spiritual bypassing. And you will be surprised. I'm surprised actually when I hear all these kind of spiritual teachers, gurus just talking about all they're talking about is spiritual bypassing. So the point is, we cannot reach our goals by burying our heads in the sand or burying our heart in the sand for that matter. What we bury will eventually come back to bite us. The universe did not send us here to bury ourselves or partly bury ourselves. One of the greatest psychoanalysts in the universe or the world has ever seen, Carl Jung, Jung. I am such a big fan of his work, and I really have followed his work. I've done a lot of research in his work, on his work. One of the greatest minds, equivalent to Einstein, so to speak. He says, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. What is he saying? Bring the hidden parts to consciousness. That's how you progress in life, in the spiritual world, in the spirituality. I can tell you again and again, the spiritual world these days has gone crazy. There's a whole new movement in the spiritual world which just says, okay, dance with divine light and divine love. Yes, we need to think about divine light and divine love, but we do need to go inside as well. They're all talking about just going to higher dimensions, fifth dimension, 10th dimension. God knows how many dimensions are there. And I'm not even sure, I seriously tell you, I'm not sure if any of this will get you to the 13th dimension or not, but it will certainly help you reach the hospital faster. I guarantee you that. It's just crazy. Anyway, enough of that. God sent us here to live a messy human life and learn from it in these 3 dimensions and then progress. And I said, yes, love, light, visualizations, meditations are absolutely fantastic. In fact, they're absolutely necessary for growth. However, we need to be able to process the junk that comes up when we are doing the self-work. So imagine a dirty glass of water. What happens when you pour clean water into it? First, the dirty water will come out. The dirt will come out. And we need to be able to process that. We cannot suppress the dirt. Okay, so that's about the problem statement. Now let's talk about solutions. So the first step in healing is to become aware of our coping mechanisms and our wounds, both of them. The question to ask is, what do you run to when you feel afraid, when you feel lonely, when any other negative emotions comes up? What do you run to? Do you run to alcohol? Do you run to Netflix? Do you run to your phone to check your email? Whatever else. And there's nothing wrong with any of it. But if it is a coping mechanism, then there is a problem. And these coping mechanisms come in all different flavors. It could be something physical that you run to. It could be some emotional thing that you run to. It could be some person you run to. There's just an infinite possibilities. Another way of saying is when your wounded I am is getting triggered, what coping mechanism do you habitually apply to hide the pain of the wound? And as I said, it could be any number of things: food, alcohol, anger, fighting, work, helping others, Netflix, you name it. So remember, the healing of the wound requires us to first become aware of the wound itself. If we cover up the wound too fast instinctively through some coping mechanism, we will never fully become aware of it. Now, another important thing to remember is that all negative emotions are rooted in fear, like we discussed that earlier. And these negative emotions get locked into our consciousness because of the fear. So an alcoholic cannot give up this bad habit because of the fear of not being able to deal with his loneliness, let's say. That's the fear. Now, another fundamental question to ask: what is fear actually? What is fear? We're running from fear, but what is fear? Now, no emotion is without a purpose. There is always a purpose to an emotion. So the fear is an evolutionary emotion that humans have perfected, the human body and mind has perfected over thousands of years of existence. The fear is the greatest tool for survival. In the ancient times, when a tiger was chasing a person, what does the body get into? What state does it get into? It gets into a fight or flight mode. The whole human body is so beautifully designed to handle that fear, that situation. The adrenal glands kick in, the whole body is shut down from living properly into a survival mode. That time, it's not about digestion, it's not about thinking, it's not about contemplating, it's about running or fighting. So you can survive and then you can do some other things. So it puts the human body and mind into a hyperdrive mode. And this is a very well-known scientific thing. The whole body, what it does, the way it does to survive is just amazing. So each one of us, we are parts of that ancestry. We have this deep-rooted survival mechanisms built into our body and mind. This tool that we call fear is highly, highly ingrained into our system. So note that fear has been an extremely successful tool for survival. And guess what the child does when it needs to get into a survival mode? When it does not find the safety, the child instinctively, through pre-programming, jumps into survival mode of fear, using fear as the tool. The child's body goes into that survival mode right away. So the fear, so now, of course, the situations have changed, but we are still used to using that tool very rampantly. Any situation that comes up in life, the first thing that we jump into is using fear as the tool of survival, right? If there's a conflict going on, if there's a financial issue, if there's a health issue, the body automatically jumps into the fear mode. So fear is a powerful survival and a coping mechanism, is what I'm trying to say. Now, I want you to recognize that letting go of fear is fearful itself. Why? Because if I'm without this coping mechanism, how will I survive? So, like an alcoholic who is afraid of giving up alcohol because he's afraid of not being able to deal with the loneliness. So, we have this deep rooted belief system in our consciousness which says it's not safe to let go of fear. This is my survival mode. This is my literal survival mode. If I let go of fear, I'm going to die. That's the paradox. That's the paradox, that it is so scary to leave fear. That has been used for thousands of years. How can I let go of this? And if I let go of this, I'm going to die. But now we are coming to a stage in our human existence where, fortunately, most of us are not being chased by a tiger. Right? We're not being chased by a tiger. Or some of the things that people used to really struggle with for survival earlier on. So changing this mindset, remember it's hugely dependent on minds. Changing this mindset that it is safer, underlying the word safer, to let go of fear than not to. Now fear, which was a very useful tool, is actually becoming a problem. So we need to shift that towards the current realities, that it is actually safer to let go of fear than not to. The more you start to accept that as the truth, the easier it becomes to let go of the fear. And for some people, if you like, you can do some sort of an affirmation once in a while, and you can tell your mind, it is safe for me to let go of fear and move into joy. It's safe. It's safe to let go of fear. So as you let go of fear, all the associated coping mechanisms will slowly start to fall off. Because the coping mechanisms are really in place because of fear itself. And this is how we start to shift from surviving to thriving. Your true self, the deep divine I am, starts to show up. Your true self starts to show up as you drop off the layers of coverings that were hiding your light. The coverings are all in place due to fear or the coping mechanisms. To facilitate this process of healing, I recommend these steps that you can do on a day-to-day basis. First thing is to recognize that most of us fight the uncomfortable feelings in some way or the other, right? Pay attention to that. Anytime an uncomfortable feeling is coming up in your consciousness, we immediately go into the fight mode. We don't want to experience that. Why? Because that uncomfortable feeling feels like a threat to our existence. It's just an emotion. It's not a threat. So we try to divert our attention, change them, hide them, fight with them, fight with the uncomfortable feelings. And as we talk, there are millions of ways we do that. Society even considers negative feelings as a sign of weakness. So fighting the negative emotions is where we really go wrong and cause damage in the long term. Don't fight these emotions. Watch out whenever you are getting into an internal fight mode. Notice that. Notice I'm getting into a fight mode right now. It's an uncomfortable, I'm feeling uncomfortable, and I'm getting into a fight mode. So stop yourself at this point and say, okay, I'm not going to get into the fight mode. Let me wait for a second, like before I jump into the fight mode. So let me give you an example that many of you would be really able to relate to. Say you have a child, a small child, who comes to you crying. She's upset. What would be the right way to help the child? Right? Saying stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about will certainly not be the right thing, right? So the first thing you do is you hug the child. Don't say anything, just hug the child. Hug the child, comfort the child, give it love so that it knows that it is safe with you. Then the next step is after, not before. When the child is feeling a little better, feeling comforted, is probably crying less, then you ask the child what happened. What's bothering her? With complete genuineness in your heart, try to understand how the child is feeling. And I underline this, with complete genuineness in your heart, try to understand how the child is feeling. Make sure you're 100% non-judgmental. This is what the child is experiencing in the moment, and she has a right to feel the way she feels. And it does not matter how childish the issue is. You must validate the child that it's okay. It's okay to feel the way you're feeling. I love you regardless. Otherwise, the child will lose the trust. Now, after you've done these first two steps, then you go to the third step, which is also very important. Now you take the opportunity to help the child see a different and a mature perspective. This is how you help the child to learn and grow, to help the child make better choices. If you just do the first two steps, it's not enough. Eventually, and don't jump into the third step, you have to get to the third step. Let me ask you a question. How many of you did have parents who did this for you? You'll be surprised. I didn't, for sure. I'm sure most of you didn't. But yeah, most of us grew up in environments which are pretty dysfunctional. So, and some of you may have been fortunate enough to have at least some parents who did at least one or two of these steps. But it's not just the steps, it's the order which is important as well. So just to recap, the three steps are unconditional love first, no questions asked. Then understanding and validation. And the third step is wisdom and choice. This is how we learn to grow. Now, if you guys did not get this, well, you're in luck. Now you do it to yourself. So just to recap a little bit again, that the first word you got to start making a friend of, it's okay. Any emotion that you're having is okay. That's what the parent was doing in the previous slide. First two steps were just about okay, it's all okay. What you're feeling is fine. There's no rights and wrongs about it. It's an emotion. We have a right to our emotions. So make this word okay as your best friend to allow the emotions to come up and not suppress them. I give the analogy of a beach ball. Allow this beach ball to come up. Don't hold it inside the water. It takes too much energy to hold it inside the water, under the surface. Release and see how it comes up, and it feels so much better to just even let it out. Let it come up without any judgment. And I use this visualization quite frequently. If I'm getting a negative emotion come up in my consciousness that I'm feeling, then I'll first pay attention to it, and I'll use this visual of the beach ball just popping out. Let it come up. It's just an emotion. It's just an energy. No good or bad. Um, and another point, if you don't let these emotions out, you will start acting on that. So you don't have to act on these emotions. That's the important part also. You don't have to act on them. In fact, the more you process your emotions, then you can make, you don't start reacting. You actually make intelligent choices then. And the next step, as I mentioned, is to use wisdom. Wisdom to make different choices after you have processed the emotion. So let me give you a complete example of this process by giving my own example. So because of my critical parents, one of my core wound was that I'm not good enough. And this was a wound, and a very painful wound. The painful, every which way I saw it, it was just like somebody's touching that wound and it just hurts like hell. And this wound started to manifest in pretty bad ways in physical reality. So the kind of coping mechanisms I used, one of the coping mechanisms was anger. I used anger to cover up this wound because the wound was really painful as hell. And I used to get angry at people who tried to make me feel that I'm not good enough. Anytime somebody tried to make me feel I'm not good enough, I just went berserk. I immediately got into a battle mode, like I was talking earlier. Fight mode. Fighting with that person in some form, of course, emotionally, that they were making me feel bad, and I just went into an emotional mode of anger. So the first step in healing, as I said, was to become aware of my triggers, to know what is really hurting me, to let the emotion come out so that I can even understand what is causing it. And if I connected enough dots, anytime I got triggered and I connected the dots and I saw that, oh my God, there's a commonality between all these events that are happening outside in my physical reality. My parents said something, my wife said something, my kids said something, my friends said something, and I got triggered. So every time I got triggered, I made a mental note. Okay, I got triggered here, I got triggered here, I got triggered here. What is common in all of this? What is the commonality? And then oops, sorry. And the commonality I found was that I'm feeling like I'm not good enough, and somebody is like trying to invalidate me, and it's really hurtful. So once I understood the commonality, that gives me power now. I have knowledge now what is going on inside my consciousness. The second step was for me to validate myself, to be with myself, to love myself unconditionally. Of course, I'm going to get angry, right? Isn't that obvious? Somebody is trying to invalidate me, somebody is being unkind to me. It will trigger me, it will make me angry. It's okay. I love myself. I hug myself and I say, it's okay. It's okay. Of course, you'll feel that way. And that's the truth. I'm not just making it up. It's the truth that it'll hurt. So that's it's the very important step is saying okay and validation. And after I calmed down a bit and I loved and validated myself, then I bring the wisdom. Now, this wisdom part is tricky. Let me be very honest. It's tricky. It's not straightforward. Because we are just so covered up with all these coping mechanisms and all these, we have not been trained into handling things like this. There's nobody who taught us how to deal with this. So the wisdom part can become very tricky. It requires some self-reflection, understandings. A teacher is absolutely fantastic and necessary. I believe it's critical to have a teacher you can go to and say, okay, this is what's going on. What can I do? Right? And sometimes you can figure it out on your own. Sometimes you can't. So for my specific case that I was talking about, I started to recognize that I'm getting triggered even after I have become relatively secure on my own self. And I want you to recognize the importance of this, what I'm saying. If I had not become secure on my own self, then it'll be hard to apply this wisdom that I'm telling you. This came in later, right? So I had to use other methods where I had to use other methods to deal with my emotions at that time, other wisdoms. And the reason I'm saying is, like, for example, if you hear so many times people talking about use forgiveness. Yeah, forgiveness is great, wonderful thing. But if applied by the person at the wrong time, it will backfire. You're not ready for it. Maybe a better way to deal with it would be some other way to do it, which is very situation and a person dependent. So I used many, many different techniques over many, many years to deal with that anger. And each time I used a different technique and I grew from that, then a next technique came in. So that's the growth process. I become more and more wiser as I heal. So the final thing was that I was trying to say was that at some point I came and realized that I don't even have this wound very much left. Maybe a little bit here and there, remnants of it, but it's not really there. I'm pretty secure in my own self. But out of habit, I was still applying those coping mechanisms. So anybody said something, even after I had healed inside, I still jumped into that mode. And that I healed by picking up the latest tool, which said the new habit that I picked was I'm not going to get into this fight. It doesn't matter what the other person thinks. And I started using the thought process that I started telling the other people, whether internally or externally, to other person, whether it was my friend, whether it was my parent, whether it was my wife, whoever. Okay, you're right. I'm wrong. Let's just move on with our lives. You go your way, I go my way, right? So I just sort of disconnected from that. It's like made no sense anymore. You think you're right? Great, wonderful. You think I'm wrong? Wonderful, excellent. Let's just move on. So it was not worth my energy and time anymore. And it became so relieving to me to not get into that battle anymore. So almost the other half of the equation is, as you start growing, you start to appreciate yourself. So while you're healing all these wounds and stuff, you also start to appreciate yourself for what you've done, where you've come, what you have become in the moment. See, we cannot be just dealing with the problems itself, or trying to find solutions for our problems. We have to look at the positive as well, right? So we need to do both at the same time. So thank yourself, appreciate yourself, value yourself as best as you can at a given moment. And that's the other part of the healing part equation. Now, I want to really point out that the whole existence on this planet at this time, or not at this time, I think it's just generally true, is a paradox. And there, we simultaneously live the two sides of the paradox. So we are divine beings, absolutely, no questions about it. But we still have to work towards it. Right? That's the paradox. To become more and more aware and realized, we have to work towards it. It just doesn't happen. It's not just automatically you'll become divine one day. So we are divine, yet we have to work towards it. That's the paradox. And the same paradox applies to anything and everything. You take a room temperature water, is it hot or is it cold? It's both at the same time. And that the paradox is something very hard for the human mind to deal with. We just want everything black and white. Just tell me the answer. Should I do this or should I do that? Well, the answers are not always that straightforward. So we have to learn to some degree to become comfortable with the paradox. And healing is no different. Healing is a paradox as well. So while you need to learn to surrender to what is in the moment, what is going on in the moment, what is there in the moment right now, is you have to accept that. And then the other half of the healing paradox is that you have to struggle. You have to do the work. So you just can't say, okay, my life sucks. I'm going to sit on my chair and wait to die, right? And on the other side of the paradox, you just can't be struggling all the time. You cannot be in the fight mode constantly. That will put you in a pretty negative state. So we do this, we have to combine the two sides of the paradox. And the greatest healing happens when we are right in the middle, balanced. We are centered. We accept the current situation and the current state we are in. Okay, this is where I am at right now. This is not who I am. This is where I'm at on my journey. This is, life sucks right now. Yes. Okay, I accept it. Things are not perfect, but I'm still going to work towards it. So that's the tricky part, that we need to learn how to manage this paradox. So if you can learn to manage this paradox and walk the tightrope, or another good analogy is when you learn to ride the bike. You don't fall this side, you don't fall that side. When you learn to ride the bike, it becomes pretty enjoyable. Another example that my teacher used to give me is, what happens if, let's say, somebody is sinking in the quicksand? Thank God I've never experienced it. I don't want to experience it. What happens when somebody's sinking in the quicksand? My teacher used to say, if you are sinking in quicksand, the first thing you have to do is stop struggling. You have to accept you're right now in the quicksand, you're in a bad situation, and this is where I'm at right now. Because if you struggle, you go down faster, right? No questions about it. In a quicksand, if you fight, you go down much faster. Now, when you're in that state where you're a little bit composed, then you start to say, what can I do now? What are my options? So one of the options that my teacher used to say is that you slowly start to shift your weight from being vertical to being more horizontal, meaning you want to lay down on the quicksand and not be vertical, because the vertical will makes you go fast inside. The more horizontal you are on the quicksand, the greater chances of survival. And then when you're completely flat on the sand, slowly do that, completely flat on the ground, and then you crawl out of the quicksand. Well, that's what he told me, and I think that makes some sense, at least from an analogy perspective. It might be quite different when somebody is actually going through that experience. But that's what happens when we are in fear mode, survival mode. The more we struggle, the faster we sink. And that's the truth. In closing of this whole section of solution, I would like to give you another analogy that my teacher used to give me. He said that imagine you are at the river bank and you need to cross the river. There's nothing out there, and you find a boat. And you say, oh, this looks good. I'm going to take the boat and I'm going to cross across the river. And you do that. You take the boat, you cross across, you go on the other side, you're on a better side. Now you say, wow, this boat was really useful. It is a really useful tool to have with me. So you say, okay, I'm going to take this boat with me and I'm going to carry it on my head. So now you take this boat with you and start carrying on your head. And you come across a desert. And there's dry and there's no water, there's no river, of course, and you're still carrying this boat on your head. Eventually, you just die of carrying the boat on your head because you don't need the boat, but you're still carrying it because you think that it was a very useful tool to use at some point. So the moral of the story is drop the tools that you don't need anymore. So slowly and gradually, as you start to drop these tools that you have used in the past, like coping mechanisms, whatever else you have used, you drop those tools so that you can shift from surviving to thriving. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a couple of other things now. And we are going to do a meditation in the end. So if you guys want to stay for that, that'll be great. And yeah. So accomplishing well-being. And as many of you can recognize this metaphorically, we have all felt that like we are sinking in the quicksand. The more we are struggling, the more we are sinking. The more we are struggling, the more we are sinking. So how do we really get to the other side? How do we come out of this? We all want to experience permanent joy and peace and rest and happiness, right? That's the goal. That is the goal. That is not necessarily on the path, but it is the goal though. So how do we accomplish this goal is the question. So I talk about these three pillars of support, three pillars of well-being. The first pillar is self-work. You cannot get on the other side without self-work. Some level of self-work. It has to be done right. It has to be done carefully. You can't be struggling. Struggling is not self-work. Okay? So very careful self-work is necessary to heal. The second pillar is of support. I don't personally believe we can get on the other side without support. And the third pillar is of patience. Extremely important. Self-work pillar, we talked at great length about that in the previous section. Right? You go through the techniques we discussed, you use your own techniques, make your own techniques, do the work that you need to do to safely get on the other side. Remember, it's important to do it safely. You do it incorrectly, it will become unsafe. The second pillar is of support. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my work here that I do through my healing work to provide the support to my clients. And that's through life-drawn healing, which many of you probably know, and it's through my personal sessions. So life-drawn healing is quite an unprecedented way to heal our consciousness, and it's a support thing. So if you remember from the slide on map of consciousness, these are the layers, right? So everything can be, every challenge can be traced back to your I am, to some degree of I am, or challenge or even the good stuff. And changing this I am is not an easy task. It's like dying to your previous self. When you're trying to let go of your coping mechanisms, it almost feels like dying. Sometimes it feels like dying because you're letting go of an identity. Like, for example, for me, I'm giving an example. At some point, I started to feel that I'm a very powerful man. And I actually started to experience that, the power. And that was such a contrast to my coping mechanism of weakness. So that fight, that conflict between the power and the weakness was so stark that I sometimes just lost my mind because of that. So yeah, I couldn't think straight because it was so overwhelming to my system. One side, the light is coming, the other side is this darkness fighting, and I'm just stuck in this middle state. It was pretty terrible at that time. And I still struggle with it at times because all the remnants are not 100% gone, and that's the work. So healing the coping, I am, changing the identity is difficult. And I truly believe life-drawn healing system is the only healing system in the world that works on healing your identity layer, the I am layer. All the other healing systems that I know of work on one of the upper layers. For example, Reiki and some of the other energy healing methods work on the energy body, which is above the I am layer. Then your feelings and stuff, there's so many emotional healing techniques and whatnot. Then the mental body, psychotherapy is a perfect example. The modern medicine psychotherapy is about healing the mind, right? And then on the top is the physical body, which is the modern medicine related, and other ways too. So all these layers work on the higher layers above the I am layer. And that's sometimes also the reason that the life-drawn therapy does take time. Sometimes it takes more time. It's not an instant result. It can be, sometimes it's not. But the changes are very radical and very permanent. You'll be not the same person. So life-drawn healing is really designed to clear up your consciousness from lifetimes of negativity that are stored in your I am layers. And as your consciousness becomes more and more positive, the better life becomes. The more toxic our consciousness, the worse life becomes. Now, if you remember from the earlier discussion, or the whole discussion about childhood wounds and whatnot, how do these wounds get created? At least in this lifetime. Of course, we're carrying it from previous lifetimes as well. But in this lifetime, how they're getting created? They are getting created because of the 24-hour presence of a negative environment. Right? If you're in a 24-hour positive environment, you will not experience any trauma. And the issues that most of us are dealing with will not be there in our life. Unfortunately, that's not the case for most of us. So all these traumas got formed, they got deeply embedded in our consciousness because of the 24-hour presence of negative environment of some kind or the other. It was not 23 hours. It was not 23 and a half hours. It was 24 hours. So the point I'm making is the word 24 hours is very important to note. And sometimes I give this example. Let's say you're living in a very polluted city, very polluted, filled with carbon monoxide, right? And you're in the city 23 hours a day, working, doing whatever. And then you come home and for 1 hour you say, oh, I've been in this toxic environment for so long. Let me breathe fresh air for 1 hour. So you put on the oxygen mask and you breathe some fresh air. Wonderful. What is going to happen when you put down the oxygen mask and go back in the world, right? All that oxygen will get wiped out in no time because the rest of the time is going to overwhelm your system. So 24 hours constant is necessary. So all this junk that we picked up from lifetimes is all stored in our consciousness. So like I mentioned that I used to work for Motorola for 16 years. I designed the wireless systems, 3G, 4G wireless systems. And because I was struggling with my own issues, one fine day I woke up and said, what if there's a way to find some healing energy that can be transmitted to a person 24 hours a day? This 24 hours sort of stuck in my mind. That, okay, how can we do this 24 hours? Because I know 23 hours is not enough. So that's the time I embarked on this journey to design a healing system that is meant to transmit healing energy to a person 24 hours a day. So I developed this device called Lifetron device. It's an electromagnetic device that after many, many years of work and experimentation, I designed and placed it in the Himalayas, in the city of Darjeeling. It is placed inside the house of a friend of mine who helps me maintain this device for me. And I live in the Bay Area and I connect from here to this device through the internet. What this device does, it harnesses particles of life energy that I call lifetrons. I actually picked that term from Yogananda's book, Your Autobiography of a Yogi. Lifetron particles that are abundantly available in nature. So this device harnesses these particles, and as these particles come into the device, it programs these particles with your name and your intentions. What is it that you're looking for? And because these particles are coming from the realm of superconsciousness and they go back into superconsciousness, they know how to find you, where to find you, who you are, just based on your name. And these particles are super intelligent, of course. They're coming from the realm of superconsciousness. They know how to heal your problems. So they will start to work on you, clear up your consciousness, and move you, propel you towards greater and greater well-being. I also give the analogy of, imagine you're tuning. And so sometimes people ask me, how does this work? So of course, it's a pretty complicated mechanism inside. Just like your cell phones are complicated, but we all don't understand how it works. We still use it. Um, the the analogy I give is that imagine a radio that you're using, like a music radio that channel tunes in into a radio station. So this device is essentially tuning into the vibrational frequency where these lifetron particles, which also I also call them God particles or grace particles, reside. So just like your radio, where the music starts to flow when you tune in exactly to that frequency. This device, when it tunes into that frequency, these particles start to flow through the device, just like the music starts to flow through the radio. And then the device is able to program them with your name and your intentions, right? And this is all done wirelessly. There's no wires you need. It's just your name required to transmit this energy to you. Okay. Yeah, so as I was mentioning, these are particles of life energy, light energy, life energy, God energy, whatever you want to call it. Already discussed this. Another simple example I give, let's say there is so much talk about solar energy these days, right? So where are they building the solar plants? They're putting it in, let's say, Arizona, Nevada, those places, right? Where there's plenty of sunshine. That's the reason I put this in the Himalayas, because there's easy access to lifetron particles. It's clean environment energetically, so it's easy to harness it from there. And once the solar energy is harnessed, it is transmitted through the wires to your homes. Similarly, the Lifetron device, it does it wirelessly. It doesn't require wires. It transmits these particles to you anywhere on the planet. Okay. Sorry, I've got some extra slides here. And the point I'm making again is that in the constant presence of this energy, the person's body and mind begins to heal at a pretty deep level. It will work at the higher levels as well. It's not just the I am layer it starts working on. It works at all layers of your consciousness, emotional, physical, mental, feelings, everything. And to see the testimonials on my website, and these are, mind you, these are Google verified 5-star reviews, most of them are. And there are over 475 reviews there. This is not a small number. Show me any healing system, any healer in the world who can claim these many verified reviews. These are Google verified reviews collected by a Google approved company, and you can check upon that. So the last point I'm going to make is, we live in a world where we think that, or we are again coming from a habitual place of thinking that if I need to reach from point A to point B, this is the method to use. And what did people use in the past? If they wanted to go from LA to New York, they either walked, they took a horse, did a bike ride, something like that, right? And great, that was great. But in this day and age, that's going to be so tiring, so painful, such a long trip, and very expensive. You're going to stay in the hotels, eat the food for a month or two. But these days, it's so much easier to buy a plane ticket, travel in relative comfort, and go much faster than it would be otherwise, right? So similar analogy here, that now this kind of thing is becoming available where you can travel in relative comfort. Relative, it's not necessarily all comfort. Relative comfort reach much faster than you would do it just struggling on your own. So, and it's so cheap. Like, you look at my pricing on my website, less than the cost of a massage, you can have 30 days of 724 Lifetron energy, and it'll start shifting. It really works. Okay, in closing, I was sinking in the quicksand in the earlier stages of my healing work, healing life. I tried everything you could imagine, everything, almost everything, right? And I still was sinking. Why? Because the more I was sinking, the more I struggled, the more I struggled, the more I started sinking. So the whole purpose of this Lifetron healing system is to support you, help you stabilize yourself, and come out of this quicksand. So that's about my Lifetron healing. And then going a couple of quick minutes about personal sessions. My personal sessions, there are different, you can even have 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour. All the pricing are on my website under the pricing page. And the personal sessions, there's a lot that go on in the personal sessions. First is I will read your energy field to see really exactly what the issue really is going on. I will transmit a lot of healing energy during that session, which is completely based on love and acceptance, which itself is 50% of the healing. So just like in the example we told, it's going to be, you will feel it. You see my reviews about my personal sessions, people feel safe in the sessions. They're not being judged, they're not being criticized, they're not being told what to do first. You will feel at rest and peace. And sometimes I use a combination of psychotherapy, energy healing, hypnotherapy also once in a while, and to bring the person to a state of rest and peace so that they're struggling less, and then take them through the process of change. And I also look at your true I am, which is probably the biggest part of healing. When I see your true I am, you will start to see it too over some time. It doesn't matter who sees the I am. Anybody who sees the I am, true I am, it gets activated. So your divine self starts to get activated when it is seen, being acknowledged, being valued. So there's a lot that goes on in a personal session. And of course, sometimes it takes more than one session. So don't just keep struggling with the same issues over and over again. I can guide you, I can support you, I can help you. And I'm probably one of the only healers that at least I know of who has his cell phone number on the website, right? And I'm always available. Text me, call me, WhatsApp, whatever, to ask a question if you need to. If sometimes I can spend a minute just to tell you something that I can help you with, or give you some guidance, some solution, maybe, right? And sometimes people come for other things, like say, okay, my God, I'm struggling with this very nasty issue. Can you help? Yes. So people who are my clients, I'll say, okay, I'll use my own spiritual powers to bring about some change for you, for help for you. Well, recently a client of mine who came and said he was going through some major issue in his life, and I helped him with my own spiritual powers, and a couple of days later he says, "Yeah, I'm feeling much better. My issue has been almost resolved." So I can help. I can be a support structure for you. So like I said, a lot happens in the personal sessions. There's a lot of energy transmitted. Things happen that you may not even recognize on the surface, but they go on inside. The third pillar is absolutely critical. Patience, patience, patience. This earth plane is about growth. Earth plane is about growth, and growth takes time, can take time. Yes, we need relief, absolutely, and we'll do all, you can do all kinds of different things, yes, and I'll be here to provide you with that relief in best ways I can. But patience is necessary for permanent healing, for complete healing. To move on the other side, we need patience. And the patience is grounded in the understanding that the action happens in the now and the results come in the future. Somehow the mind wants the results now, the action in the future. Doesn't work that way on this earth plane. We have to put the action now. That's the only time we can do the action. And the results will come in the future. Always remember that. You're creating a better future through your actions now. You will not see the results right away. How long will it take to see the results? God only knows. Who knows? But unless you do the action, the results will also not come. So we just cannot sit and wait and wish things will happen. We have to act. Action is the key component of change in this physical plane, right? Proper action, right action. We can be doing the wrong action and not get results, but proper action is necessary. That's why wisdom is important. Okay, let's do a short meditation. And I'm going to see there are, wait, how does this work? Okay. And there are, I think, questions people have. Okay, all right, let's do a quick meditation. And then if anybody has any questions, comments or anything, we'll talk about that after this, okay? All right, so I'm wondering what meditation would be the best for the group today. Okay, let's do this, my favorite meditation. Okay, so first, just take a couple of deep breaths. Now scan your body from the top of your head to the toes for any stress or tension in your body and release that. And you can lay down or sit or whatever is comfortable to you. So pay attention to your top of your head, then the forehead, release any tension, then your face, ears, lips, cheeks, eyes, release any tension. Then your neck, release any tension. Then your shoulders, arms, palms, hands, fingers, release any tension. Then your upper chest, then lower chest, then abdomen, then your hips, Upper part of your legs, release. Lower part of your legs, release. Feet, toes, release. And keep breathing during this time. Scan the entire body, top to bottom. Release, release, release. Feel the release, feel the relief. Now imagine a ball of light the size of a golf ball, 6 inches above the crown of your head. This is ball of light made from God particles. Now let this ball of light descend towards your crown chakra. Enter your body through the crown and then let it go from the crown to the sixth, vertically from the top to the base of your spine. We're going to go up and down. And feel it while it's going. Feel the ball, imagine the ball. Sixth chakra, let it descend to the fifth, let it descend to the fourth, to the third, to the second, to the first. Stay there for a few seconds. Now go back up, first to second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. Excellent work. Now we're going to do this 2 more times. This time we're going to make an intention that this ball of light removes anything, any coping mechanisms, any wounds, or anything else that I don't need anymore, to absorb, transmute, and release that energy. Very specific intention to remove anything that I don't need anymore. And please be willing to let it go. Willingness is important. You're safer. Remember, you're safer without these coping mechanisms. So going from the seventh, release, 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 down to the sixth, let it go, let it go, let it go. It's safe. You're safer without these. Then to the fifth, release. Don't need it anymore. You want to thrive. You want to be joyful. You can let it go. Then to the fourth, let go of any old griefs, anger, resentment, frustrations, anything that you're holding in your heart. Grudges. Don't need them. You're pretty self-sufficient. Then to the third, removing any emotionality that is not useful for you. Then to the second, Release any physical related issue. Then to the first, you want to live a happy life and you don't need any coping mechanisms that are causing disturbance in your physical existence. Don't need them. You've overcome your challenges. You're in a better place. Going up to the second, release, release, release. Let it go, let it go, let it go. Let this ball of light transmute all that energy. Remove and transmute. Third, same thing. Release, release, release. Fourth, release. Fifth, release. Sixth, release. Seventh, release. Look and feel at the release and the relief in your system as you have let go. And this light has transmuted all that energy and cleaned up your chakras. That you will feel a sense of relief and release. Even if it is a little bit or it is more, just acknowledge that relief. Then go back down. We are going to do this again, last time, but this time with the intention of receiving, allowing whatever we need to live a healthy, happy life in these three dimensions. And any wisdom and learnings that we require to be well, to be happy. We need it, we deserve it, we want it, we demand it. So we are requesting, demanding from this ball of light to fill us up with goodness. Be a part of the Holy Spirit. Starting from the seventh, allow, allow, allow. Absorb, take in, receive. It's yours. Down to the sixth, allow. Down to the fifth, allow. Down to the fourth, take the love and the joy. Then to the third, more love, more joy. Then to the second, more well-being on this physical plane of existence. To the first, more well-being, physical well-being. Then to the second again, allow. Third, allow. Fourth, allow. Fifth, allow. Sixth, take it. Seventh, fill yourself. Now take a moment to feel yourself being fulfilled, even if you feel it Just a little bit. Acknowledge it. Now let this ball of light go up where it came from. Say thank you 3 times. Thank you, thank you, thank you for whatever you have done for me today. All that you've done for me today. Thank you. Okay, my friends, you can open your eyes and come back to reality. So feel free to unmute yourself and
Thank you.
bring any questions or anything you want. Comments, questions. Just state your name and then you can say.
Hi, this is Michelle. Can
Hey,
you post your link on in the chat for us?
Link to what, sorry?
Your website.
Oh yeah, yes, okay, I will.
Thank you. And this was a great presentation. Thank you so much. I actually fell asleep in the middle of the meditation. I just woke up again.
That's good.
I could hear you the whole time, but I fell asleep.
Absolutely, there is. You can fall asleep is a good thing, actually. Falling asleep is good. Yeah, you will still absorb the energy.
Thank you.
Okay, I posted on the chat. sanjaynamar.com. My first name, last name, and .com.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Michelle. Okay, anybody else has any feedback, comment, experience, questions, anything? Anything, I'm here.
I guess you can hear me, Doris here.
Yes, Doris, I can hear you. What's going on?
Pardon, you can hear me, you say?
I can hear you, Doris. Yes.
Good. Yeah. Thank you very much. We enjoyed it. I really went into a trance, I feel here.
Good.
I went floating out into space.
That's what it was meant for.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome, Doris. Thank you. Bye-bye. Anyone else? Any questions about anything? Life, love, or anything? Any questions? If not, we will close it very soon.
Sanjay, it's Allison. Would you be able to, is this to listen to this again?
Yes, yes. No, of course, of course. Yeah, I will send it. I will send out the replays by today or tomorrow, let's say.
Wonderful. It was just incredible. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. I appreciate that feedback. No, great. Excellent. Okay.
Thank you very much. This is Morana Kay. I really appreciated being here. And I learned I do practice becoming your own loving parent a lot with the patients that I see. And I have a new child, and he's getting into the 2-3 age. And I've been incredibly fearful of not correctly providing unconditional love and support. But what I was affirmed of here was the first couple of steps, and I was unsure where to go next after validating his emotions. You know, I first start off with like all the things you were talking about, but after that, I was like, okay, is it enough? And I liked offering wisdom, and I hadn't thought about this idea about, you know, offering a new perspective, a more mature perspective. At some point you use the word mature, and I do want that for him to be able to not only validate and accept his own emotions when I'm gone or not available, but for him to have a mature response to his reality that lends him the opportunity to be effective in all of his relationships or in his pursuits or things like that. And so I was really grateful to have received that knowledge.
Beautiful. But please also, initially when you said that you were not sure if you're providing enough love or validation, right? Is that what you said initially?
Well, in some respects, yes. And one of the main goals I have is just for him to feel unconditional love from me. Because as you've talked about too, I have a narcissistic mother who's very critical, and something that I find myself asking for in my intimate relationships is unconditional regard. And I want my son to feel the same.
Yeah, but you are always loving, right? There is no such thing, I believe, no such thing as not enough love. Especially from you're doing what you can at a given moment in time, the best you can. So I don't think there's a question about whether you're loving him enough or not.
Okay.
You're loving him the best you can at a given time, and you are doing well. And I'm not just saying this as an intellectual thing. I can feel it in your energy field.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it. And I also appreciate being able to offer him wisdom.
Yes, of course. You're doing excellent. Keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. Not doing bad at all. No, you're doing well. You're doing well. And I'm telling you, not just intellectually. Believe me, I can feel your energy. Okay, excellent. All right, my friends, if nobody else has any questions or comments, I'm going to close this now. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being with me, spending the time with me today, and sharing your energy, your love with me, and me sharing with you. And I'm really grateful for that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay.
Excellent as always. Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay.
Who's this?
Hey, this is Maria.
Maria, yes. Yes, Maria.
Yes, for a week now, I've been wanting to write and start the energy for my mother-in-law. We had spoken about it once. So now that I'm talking to you, may I ask you, can I do a surrogate session for her, like a session before I start the? Yeah. Or it doesn't make a difference, or it wouldn't help. Only the energy transmission.
No. The sessions are fine too. We can do a surrogate session. Yeah, either way, whatever you feel.
It's of course she's given me permission. Just that unless like she only speaks Italian, so I would do the session.
Yeah, but please, Maria, remember.
Or German.
Yeah, Maria, please remember, when you're doing a surrogate session for somebody else, you are healing in it as well, because there's some connection between you and the mother, right? So
mother-in-law, yes.
Sorry, mother-in-law. There's some connection there. So you want
obviously.
You want to heal yourself in the process as well. So it will be helpful for you too, not just her. Yeah, and it'll help her too, of course.
Yes. Because we talk, she has severe lung. She's not able to breathe. We've done many rounds, all the doctors, and they're just like, well, she's just not able to breathe. Like the structure is not holding up. She's bending and so I'm thinking this is the only, hopefully this is gonna help bring her some relief.
Yeah, it will. It will. Absolutely will. Yes. But just be patient though. Yeah, just be patient.
Yes, of course. I'm learning that. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome, Maria. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for this class. It's excellent.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. All right, my friends. Bye-bye. See you again. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.